where the latest inflation report shattered expectations. Watch.
Expecting up 0.3, up 0, goose egg, unched. Boy, that is progress. We haven't had a number that low. Well, we equaled it in July of last year when we had another 0. To find a lower number, you're back to October of 23 at minus 0.4. Strip out the all-important food and energy, down 1/10. Down 1/10. That's 0.4 lower than expectations. Down 1/10 also equals July of last year. Find a lower number, you're going back to COVID times, April of 2020.
And the success doesn't stop there, because earlier today, Putin agreed to a ceasefire framework in Ukraine after President Trump took steps to stop Europeans from buying Russian oil. Here's President Trump earlier today during his meeting with the NATO Secretary General.
A ceasefire from Russia, and we have, not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost, and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant, and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process. But phase one is the ceasefire. A lot of the individual subjects have been discussed, though. We've been discussing concepts of land because you don't want to waste time with the ceasefire if it's not going to mean anything. So we're saying, look, this is what you can get. This is what you can't get. They discussed NATO and being in NATO, and everybody knows what the answer to that is. They've known that answer for 40 years, in all fairness. So a lot of the details of a final agreement have actually been discussed. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
And on the southern border, the president is delivering another success story. Border Patrol's nationwide recorded gotaways have plummeted to a stunningly low daily average of just 77 over the last 21 days. For comparison, Biden averaged around 1,800 gotaways per day in fiscal year 2023 at the height of the crisis, totaling over 600,000 for the year. But rather than admit these Trump successes, Democrats are spewing nonstop hate and attacking all things Trump. And now they even want to shut down the government, something they used to say was the ultimate sin. Here's a quick reminder. Watch.
Are marching America to a painful government shutdown. But we need traditional Republicans to break with MAGA extremists so we can keep the government open.
Republican shutdown will cost 6,306 of her constituents their paychecks.
Put the bill on the floor for an up or down vote so we can end this MAGA Republican nightmare. And if you don't, you own this government shutdown.
And we could put the threat of a shutdown behind us. Our agreement would keep the government open, provide emergency aid for communities battered by hurricanes and other natural disasters.
It's about the harm that House Republicans will do to the American people if the government shuts down.
One Democrat said to me they feel like they have a mandate from their constituents to shut down the government.
There are some raising the possibility of shutting down the government in March.
We will use whatever power we have, and fundamentally, we're not going to vote for something that undermines the American people.
To withhold votes, do Democrats have the stomach?
I certainly hope so. I know that I'm not going to vote for their proposal for sure.
Are you prepared to shut down the government, to join Democratic colleagues who want to stand in the way of keeping the government open?
Well, there are
Is
simply
that
trying
yes?
So yes, look, if we have to take steps.
14 days from now, government shutdown is looming.
If we don't believe that we have a willing partner on the other side, then we need to stay united and not bail out President Trump.
And yet, at the same time, in order for a lot of voters to fully understand what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing, people are unfortunately going to have to feel some of that. And the only way that that happens is if the shutdown happens.
And joining me now, senior editor at the Daily Signal, author of the new book, Woke Tapas, Tyler O'Neill. Tyler, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first of all, we have a lot to cover, but ceasefire talks seem to be heading at least in the right direction towards peace. President Trump has been really tough with both Putin and Zelensky, to be fair, both. What is your read on the trajectory of all of this?
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that what we need to see is a real step toward peace. And what President Trump has been doing, unlike Biden, when Biden was president, we heard Ukraine, 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 Ukraine. But Trump came in and Trump said, look, I'm going to talk with Putin too. I'm going to talk with Russia. We have to find a solution here. And that really was the only sort of approach that was going to get anywhere positive, because you have to have both sides involved. Yes, Russia invaded Ukraine, but let's have, you only make peace with your enemies. That's why it's called making peace.
There is this idea that the messenger matters, okay? So if you think back to Reagan and taking on the USSR and think about like iconic moments like that in American diplomacy, do you see any parallels between, tear down that wall and President Trump's foreign policy mission?
Yes, I mean, I think the big parallel that we see is what Trump has said over and over and over again, which is that what we saw on October 7th would not have happened if he was president. The maximum pressure campaign on Iran is one of the signature achievements of his first administration, and he's bringing that back, which is extremely important. What we've seen is the Iranian regime has been attempting to destabilize and attack its enemies in the region, most notably Israel. And of course, we saw the horrific pogrom of October 7th, which was carried out by Iran's proxies in the form of Hamas primarily, but also in the form of Hezbollah getting involved. We had the Houthis getting involved. And Iran's ability to fund these people is what makes the Middle East so destabilizing. And so if you cut off Iran's ability to fund them, if you do what Trump did in the first administration, suddenly you have Iran held back from funding this terrorism across the region. And that was the reason why the Abraham Accords were able to make those humongous steps toward peace in the Middle East. We saw Jerusalem rightly recognized as the capital of Israel, this move that all the experts said was going to lead to World War III. And what happened? Crickets. Meanwhile, when Biden takes over and loosens the sanctions on Iran, what happened? The worst terrorist pogrom in Israeli history since, really since the Holocaust. And so there could not be a clear difference between strength on the world stage in the form of President Trump and the weakness that we saw, unfortunately, from the former president.
Well, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he has been very busy. He was at the G7 in Saudi Arabia this week and also spotlighted the growing U.S. aid scandal, which is now under the purview of the State Department. It turns out that they were even propping up entire economies, if you can believe this, in Africa, and DOJ is taking notice.
Yes. No, and I mean, this U.S. aid scandal cannot be discussed enough, because even though it is not a vast majority of U.S. government funding, it does represent a lot of American tax dollars going to woke causes that most Americans don't support. I remember back in the halcyon days of, 2005, when a certain senator by the name of Joe Biden stood by the Hyde Amendment, which was this rule that said, if you don't want your tax dollars funding the killing of the unborn in the womb, then you don't have to have your tax dollars funding abortion. I think we need a Hyde Amendment for all of the woke causes that we saw the Biden administration spend our money on. And the worst examples often came from USAID. And unfortunately, the State Department also did a lot of the funding that USAID did. But both of these entities were funding woke NGOs across the government. And, some of them here at home, there's this group called the Tides Center, which is part of the Tides Foundation. They have an in-house nonprofit representing anti-Israel rioters on college campuses called Palestine Legal. And they received $20 million from USAID. And this is all, I testified in Congress last month discussing this. But this really ties into my book because the superstructure of the left's dark money network, which was funding the activist groups that staffed and advised the Biden administration, pushing woke ideology on Americans through the administrative state, that big apparatus is very connected to USAID. And the big example is George Soros, whose Open Society Foundations has partnered with USAID, such that many of the organizations that USAID funds across the world are also getting funding from George Soros. And that is no accident, because George Soros's foundation back in the early 2000s actually listed USAID as a partner. Only later did the Soros Foundation realize, oh, it's a lot smarter if we can work behind the scenes. If we're not listed as a direct recipient of USAID, but we and USAID direct funds to the same projects and have the same impact. That's what we're seeing. I'm looking closely at the issue of Albania right now, where we've seen millions of dollars in USAID funding prop up judicial reforms that critics say has enabled Albania's socialist prime minister to prosecute his political opponents.
Unbelievable. And you're making a nice nexus, a tie-in here about your book and, exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's extremely relevant. I didn't know, when I decided to publish the book and when I knew that it was coming on the day after the inauguration, I did not know that Doge was going to be the effective revelation that it has turned out to be. Just to be honest, I thought that the book might not resonate as much because Kamala Harris hadn't won the election. Little did I know that President Trump would take a wrecking ball to these administrative agencies and go one by one, exposing the waste, fraud, and abuse that ties so closely to the nefarious actors I expose in my book.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it sounded like a good idea. Oh, they're going to do this, etc. But are you even surprised a little bit by the speed and efficiency with which they've been able to identify such, grotesque waste?
Yeah, I'm very pleasantly surprised. As I've been saying, it feels like it's morning in America, but the left and the same forces that were in control in the Biden administration want to bring Biden's blackout curtain back down over us. So we have to stay vigilant. And President Trump has really exceeded my expectations with this Doge initiative, with revealing the waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, I really think that his first administration experience of getting attacked by the deep state himself has really prepared President Trump to go to battle with these really entrenched forces in a way that we have not seen the Republican Party do since Reagan. And even under Reagan, I don't think it was as aggressive as we've been seeing from President Trump and Elon Musk.
And what do you think we're going to find out next on this fraud? What sort of roadmap can your book be to exactly what we're experiencing right now?
Yeah, I'd love to see many of the agencies look into and examine, the connections that I expose in the book, talking about the impact that these woke activist groups have had on federal agencies. I want to see the Trump administration at the Department of Justice, at the Department of Education, at the EPA. I mean, there are really great things coming out of EPA under Lee Zeldin right now. He's slashing environmental justice grants, which is a really humongous step in the right direction. But I think we need to see the documents showing how the EPA colluded with the green activist groups to crack down on oil and gas. We need to have this revelation continue. And I'm very confident that it will. I mean, right now, I've been speaking with the Office of Personnel Management, who their office used to release all of the money that public sector unions were effectively receiving from the taxpayer. This is a weird thing. I don't want to delve too far into this rabbit hole, but federal bureaucrats can get money from the taxpayer for time that they spend working for these public sector unions. And so this isn't time where they're doing their job that they're actually hired for. This is time where they're helping out these public sector unions, many of which, by the way, have filed lawsuits against President Trump to block his policies. So you have the American Federation for Government Employees, which has filed lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit to try to block Trump. And these bureaucrats can work for these unions and get paid by the taxpayer for it, which is just egregious. There used to be a website that showed the American people how much of their tax dollars was going to this corrupt practice. Biden takes over, and lo and behold, that website disappears from the internet. Gee, I wonder why. So thankfully, the Trump OPM has pledged to bring that website back. And right now they're working on compiling some of that data that the American people deserve to see.
And Democrats just attack, President Trump, like no matter what he does, okay? They've even changed their positions on government shutdowns. Is there any, I guess like these, this new extreme Democrat party, like what do you make of it? What do you make of the hypocrisy? And what do you think about this potential government shutdown?
Yeah, I think the Democrats are enthralled to these woke activist groups that I expose in the book. So right now we're seeing some interesting squirming on the Democratic Party. You had Gavin Newsom come out recently and say, "Oh, I actually think it's unfair for males to compete in women's sports."
Yes,
never mind that Gavin Newsom is not taking any steps to actually change his policies on this issue. He's just doing a head fake to suggest that he's more rational than he actually is. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. But the Democrats are stuck. We also saw this retreat where a bunch of Democrats said, we need to moderate, we need to get with the mainstream of the American people. And they came back with these recommendations that immediately the DNC wanted nothing to do with. And that's because the Democrats are still enthralled to the groups I expose in the Woktopus. And that's the reason why they're willing to have a government shutdown. And, it was so funny to me to listen to some of the rhetoric of these Democrats, because one of them said, Elon Musk is already doing half of a government shutdown. So why don't we just do a full government shutdown to show the American people that we're not putting up with this? And I'm like, well, the logic there does not work, because if you want the government operating as much as possible, which these Democrats say they do, and they want the government to help people as much as it can, well, then you should support the government becoming more specific to the needs of the actual American people. You should support them cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. This isn't a partial government shutdown. This is a government reinvitalization. It's a reinvigoration of the government so that it can do the things the American people actually wanted to do and stop doing the things the American people don't want it to do.
And what's driving this? It's been really kooky. Bizarre branding and marketing for Democrats. I mean, can they just not get out of their own way? Do they wake up in the middle of the night going, well, this will be a good idea, and they jump around like Power Rangers, whatever, all the weird stuff they do?
Yes. Well, I think they're trying desperately to connect with the American people, and they're realizing that some of their old messaging, when I think it was really revealing when President Biden took over and he said, America is back. And all the Democrats, they acted like they were in the driver's seat with American public opinion. And, we saw it turn very fiercely against them in 2022 and in 2024, and mainly because it was revealed what their actual agenda was. And we saw how much abuses they took during COVID. And one thing after another showed the American people what sort of excesses the government was doing, how the Democrats were taking advantage of the levers of power to force their ideology on us. That's not popular with the American people. And that's why we saw Trump come back with a vengeance. And I think he really has a mandate to root this out of the government, because the American people are paying attention in a way that they haven't in a long time. So the Democrats know that they're out of step with the American people, and they're squirming. They're trying to find any way they can resonate. So they want to go for TikTok videos to appeal to the youths. They want to go for memes to try to appeal to various people. We've seen, Gavin Newsom launching his long podcast to try to ape. They're mimicking what President Trump successfully did in this election, but they're not bringing the actual moderation or the actual things that are going to resonate with the American people. So it's all empty. It's all, empty carbs. It's the sort of thing that leads you down the wrong path. And so if they continue this way, I think they're going to keep floundering. And I think they might have to face many more awakenings from the American people. I long for the day when we have two sane political parties. That's what I want. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is right now. And the left needs to wake up and smell the roses, because the American people are not putting up with their ideology.
No, not at all. I think this is a sign of the times, but I mean, if they don't start becoming more moderate and more populist, I don't see how they survive, because there's been a complete wholesale rejection of their policies, of their lawfare, of their weaponization, of their, waste in government. And now that we know and it's exposed, I don't see people wanting to go back to that.
No, and I really hope that this trend continues, because what we're seeing right now is the American people waking up to all of the ways that the left has pulled the wool on their eyes. And the left has all these levers of power. And unfortunately, we have to keep vigilant, because the legacy media, Hollywood, academia, they all generally still support the left's ideology. Thankfully, corporate America is in this place where they're saying, look, we never really were all that woke. And they're moving toward, getting rid of DEI, getting rid of these things. I'm going to trust it when I see it. Right now, even though Target has opted out of the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index, I still don't trust that they've given up on woke. We're going to see. I'm glad, though, that they realize that being outwardly woke is not a recipe for success. And we have to continue to send that message that, look, if you want to appeal to the most of the American people, don't be pandering on, these particular politicized issues. Talk to what Americans really care about. Don't demonize people of faith. Work with them, include them. Don't demonize, and don't constantly push this radical environmentalist agenda that says the world is going to end in 5 years if we don't get rid of fossil fuels yesterday. This hasn't worked for decades. And, I think people are waking up, but we have to keep hammering the message home, because these elites are entrenched. And as I always say with the book, Trump is rooting woke out of the federal government, but the forces that pushed it down our throats in the first place are still there, and they're waiting for another opportunity to seize power.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, it's pretty fascinating to see it unfold, and that's why I just think it's just so timely with your book and the work that you did in there. And I know you worked very hard on it. Tell everyone where they can get your book.
Thanks. Yeah, you can find The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government, on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. We have it on hardcover, on paperback, on ebook, and next month we're going to have the audio book, which I recorded myself. So I'm very excited about that. You can also follow the Daily Signal on all platforms. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We are not on TikTok because we take no truck with the Chinese Communist Party. But you can find us wherever and on dailysignal.com.
All right, fantastic. Tyler O'Neill, always a pleasure to have you. Great work that you do over there at the Daily Signal.
Thanks
so
again
much.
for having me.
All right, be good. And much more coming up on all of this. But first, free speech is under attack, but Rumble refuses to back down, just like Trump. We've always believed in empowering independent voices, and now Rumble is taking it to the next level. We're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. And it's more than a subscription, it is a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using promo code KG10. So just visit rumble.com/premium/KG10 and you will be able to claim your discount today. That's rumble.com/premium/KG10. Now turning to big breaking developments at the EPA, where agency head Lee Zeldin unveiling the biggest deregulation effort in modern history to cut red tape, give power back to the states, and grow the economy. Here's Secretary Zeldin laying it all out. Watch.
I'm pleased to make the largest deregulatory announcement in U.S. history. The Environmental Protection Agency is initiating 31 historic actions to fulfill President Trump's promise to unleash American energy, revitalize our auto industry, restore the rule of law, and give power back to the states. EPA will be reconsidering many suffocating rules that restrict nearly every sector of our economy and cost Americans trillions of dollars. Our actions include the Biden administration's deeply flawed Clean Power Plan 2.0, mercury and air toxic standards, Quad O BC, particulate matter 2.5, light, medium, and heavy car and truck rules, NESHAPs, and the so-called social cost of carbon. To advance cooperative federalism, EPA will partner with states that were universally rejected by the last administration's Good Neighbor rule. Among many other actions, today's momentous day also includes the 2009 endangerment finding, along with all actions that rely on it. I've been told the endangerment finding is considered the holy grail of the climate change religion. For me,
Proud of our friend Lee Zeldin, always working hard, giving back, serving the American people. And, we're also seeing similar action at the Department of Education, which is important, with the department axing nearly 50% of its workforce in an effort to streamline operations and give power back to the states. Very fascinating. Joining me now, Oklahoma Superintendent of Schools, Ryan Walters. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you, Kimberly. And you called it last time we were on that this was going to happen quick.
Yeah, I fast like that. It was like wishful but accurate thinking. So the education department is, drastically slimming down. Okay, it's Washington operations. What does that mean for you? Like, how does it actually impact, on a day-to-day or weekly or whatever basis?
Absolutely. So first of all, yeah, it is incredible how quickly President Trump and Linda McMahon have moved on this front. Absolutely fantastic. We are really excited about it here in Oklahoma. And just let me walk you through some of the things. We are already starting to see the Linda McMahon offering us waivers, not giving all these regulations. When we ask for, hey, can we do this? And can we try to help students in this way? The answer is yes now instead of no, like it was just a few months ago, number one. Number two, as they begin to eliminate this agency, what we're going to see are states able to find innovative solutions. We've already started working on ways to make Oklahoma healthy again, following Robert Kennedy Jr.'s plans as well, by the freeing up of child nutrition dollars without all the regulations. We're also starting to look at ways of how do we help individual children with our special ed money now that they're doing away with all the regulations around that as well. So we're able to individualize our instruction. We're not having to spend as much time on rules, regulations, paperwork, but we're able to make sure we're meeting the needs of every individual family with their unique circumstances. And so it's really, really an awesome day to be in education in America.
And what does it mean for students? Can we put power back in the hands of the states to help and benefit American students?
That is the $1 million question, Kimberly. So you're exactly right. What this does is in eliminating all these bureaucrats, eliminating all the bureaucracy, what we're able to do are make decisions that actually make a difference for individual students. I want to give you an example. When we're talking about some of this funding, all of the red tape requires us to spend so much money and so much personnel in creating paperwork and creating programs and plans instead of actually getting the dollars to the classroom, actually getting the dollars to the families. And that's one of the things that President Trump has been the champion on, which is school choice. We want to make sure that families have as much access to decision making as possible. So if a family wants their kids to have an extra extra tutor, we want them to be able to have that. If they want more curriculum they can use at home, we want them to have that too. If they want to attend a different school, we want to make sure not only can they choose the school, but they can make sure they have the transportation to get there. And this is what happens when the federal government takes the strings away, empowers states, and then if states actually empower parents, that's really the way God intended education to work, right? He gave power to parents over their children. States should recognize that and give power back to the families, as President Trump has given us the power back from the federal government.
Well, there's been a lot of backlash to this move, to cut the department. But what should people really know about the history of the education department and how they've often, stood in the way of student success?
And Secretary Linda McMahon's done a great job on articulating this, but every academic indicator has gotten worse since the Federal Department of Education was produced. Hundreds of billions of dollars. And by the way, just to be clear, the Department of Education does not hire or pay a single teacher. What they do are hire bureaucrats. So I thought it was so funny. They were pressing Linda the other day on Fox and Friends. They were saying, hey, your opponents say this. And she went on there and said, hey, listen, they don't hire teachers here. What we're going to do is, frankly, allow states to hire more teachers, to hire more staff, to get more money to the classroom, because we're hiring bureaucrats up here. This is creating an administrative state. And so what we're doing is actually, when we get out of the way, teachers are going to have more ability to get things like merit pay, make sure that kids have all the resources they need. So it's actually the opposite of what the mainstream media is pushing. It's the opposite of what the teachers union says. This actually gets more money to the classrooms.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the most high-profile education officials in the country. What pressure does that put on you personally? And, what are the feelings of parents and students, and how we can get education in this country, back on track? Like, what's your vision, your goals for that, if you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly the right question to ask. Is it truly does. It puts all the pressure, responsibility, but also ability back on states to say, solve your own problems. We're not solving problems up here in DC for every individual state. That's never the way this was intended to work. So here you go. Here are the resources back. Here is the responsibility back. And what you're going to see, frankly, conservative states that understand that parents know best for their kids, that high expectations, not this woke, a participation trophy mentality, but actually high expectations matter, that merit pay and the free market actually work in education. States that embrace those things and get back to the basics, not trying to teach kids to be transgender or all that nonsense, but actually teach them about math, reading, science, and real history, and a love for this country. They're going to see their students thrive. They're going to see exceptional results. And you know what? I mean, if blue states want to go the other direction, President Trump's going to give the country universal school choice with the help of Congress. And so, hey, leave your public school system then. Go to a private school, go to a homeschool. But I think you're going to see red states able to absolutely take off, because Republicans and conservatives are exactly right. They understand the way education works. It starts with a family. It starts with a student and high expectations. And that's what's going to happen in your red states.
Where is the most room for improvement? Is it math, reading? Is it science? What does the data tell us?
A great question. Reading and math are where we're furthest behind. So as a country, we're furthest behind our European allies and the other countries around the world. And that's what we've got to catch back up. And what you've seen the last few decades, teachers union control of education has driven out any kind of innovation. It's driven out exceptional people from the classroom, and it has placed an emphasis on, transgenderism and CRT rather than an understanding of the basics in math and reading and science. Because the reality is, if you don't set a foundation in reading and math, they are the type of learning that you got to build upon what you learned the previous year, or you can't accelerate your learning. And so that's what we've seen over the years. And so getting the teachers unions out of control, getting back to the basics, encouraging the best teachers to enter the profession through merit pay and keeping them there in that way. This is how you get the country back on track. It's how you get an emphasis back on those high expectations. And frankly, it was where the country largely was before the creation of the Federal Department of Education.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, like you said, we're going at a pretty rapid fire pace. So it's pretty encouraging to see what we've been able to do so far. And kudos to my friends, Linda McMahon and President Trump, of course. Let's speak a little bit more broadly, about the need to deregulate, which I think is really at the core here. We're seeing it in education, seeing it at the EPA, et cetera, et cetera. What's the larger story here?
The larger story is, Washington, D.C. is the swamp. It is an agency. Every agency up there is going to grow and grow and grow and become more bureaucratic. And it takes a true change agent like Donald Trump, who surrounds himself with the most talented individuals in the country, to say, break it up. Don't be worried about getting sued. Don't be worried about making the lobbyists mad. Don't worry about, your special interest groups. Just go do the right thing. Go in there and charge the hill, and let's get this back on track. And look, this is why the country's so behind President Trump, because they see that he is carrying the weight of the American people behind him and saying, hey, I'm going to stand in the way. We are going to dismantle this giant apparatus that continues to strangle individual rights and states' ability to solve their own problems. And that's where we have got to ramp it back dramatically. And that's where you're going to see people rise up. The American people have always done that. They rise to the occasion, but we've got to get the government out of their way and off their back so they're able to do that. So taking out the giant apparatus of the federal government, and then with the tax cuts, I cannot be more clear about that. What a difference that makes for families. It empowers them. It helps them spend more time at home. It helps them be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Those two things together, he is doing a tremendous effort for our families across the country.
Yeah, and talk about your home state of Oklahoma. What does the Trump agenda mean for the great people of your state?
Well, I'm going to tell you, President Trump is special to many Americans, but I think he's uniquely special to us here in Oklahoma. Every county in Oklahoma has now voted for Donald Trump 3 times. So the last 3 elections, all 77 counties voted for President Trump. I got to spend some time with Eric Trump last week. He came in the state. He's like, hey, we never forget that. You guys here, y'all voted for my dad every time. And we love him here in Oklahoma.
Oh, that's so great. I love hearing that. Like, everyone needs to be like Oklahoma. Okay, be best. And what do you think, like, in terms of just quality of life, of communities, children, education more broadly, the direction that we're going in? Because I know you care about it, you're on top of it, you're on the pulse of it, about what it should be in this country.
Look, one of the things that President Trump started his first administration, and he's talking about it again, is, look, we've got to get back to creating patriotic Americans. That's one of the things here. We have taken a hard stand in Oklahoma of, hey, we're unapologetic about that. We had a district here that told a kid to take the American flag out of his truck, and we stood up and said, that's not going to fly here. Literally, that's not going to fly in Oklahoma. We are going to fly the American flag. We are going to make sure that our kids are patriotic, and we're unapologetic about that. We want our kids to understand the foundations of this country. So, hey, look, we put the Bible back in the classroom here. We put the Constitution back in the classroom, the Declaration of Independence. We said, listen, kids have to understand the historical importance of these documents to understand what made America great. And I think you're going to see this all over the country. President Trump has inspired people like never before to love this country, to go back to what got us great in the first place. And it starts with an understanding of American exceptionalism and American history. And so all states seem to be doing that, is reemphasizing American exceptionalism in the classroom, so this next generation truly understands what makes America great.
No, it's unbelievable. I'm excited about it. As a former educator, just like my mother was, and working with children with special needs, it breaks my heart when I see a child not getting the proper education, the resources, the tools, and then instead you see government, bureaucracy, administrative state, in the Department of Education, what a, very reckless waste of money and resources.
And to your point, I was a special education teacher also, and that's one of the most overregulated parts of education by the federal government. Talk to a special ed teacher, ask them about the paperwork they have to produce, the amount of meetings they are required to take. It is unbelievable how much we tie the hands of our special education teachers by the strings attached to the federal government. States could do such a better job if those regulations were let loose, so that frankly you could hire more special education teachers, spend more resources for those students, have more individualized education for those students. But that, again, overregulation by the federal government has really tied the hands of some of the students that need the most help. And if you give them a little bit more assistance, those students thrive in the classroom.
No, they really do. And that's the thing. They're so busy with all these meetings and nonsense that they get taken out of the classroom. And it's just a massive amount of time that's wasted and resources. You're totally right. They could have better IEPs, all of the above. So I hope we move towards that direction. I'm going to make sure you lobby about this so that we can get it done, right?
Absolutely. And look, I can't say enough about Secretary Linda McMahon. Boy, I'm telling you, she has done a tremendous job of moving quickly. And also, I just love, she is articulating the message so well to the American people of, hey, Guys, this is literally everything you have a problem with in education. Almost all of it stems from the Federal Department of Education and the teachers unions. That's why the teachers unions are losing their mind. It's going away. That was their best partner, was the Federal Department of Education. You get rid of the Federal Department of Education, the teachers union loses a tremendous amount of its power, and then teachers go back to being able to teach. Students go back to being focused on learning. You start recruiting better people in the profession and keeping the best teachers. I'm telling you, this is a game changer for education. American people have got to stand with President Trump on this and go, President Trump, this is exactly what we've asked for. But I'm telling you, I'm just continue to be impressed at how quickly his cabinet has moved forward on his initiatives. It's truly impressive.
Oh, it is. It's so good. I love it. They haven't wasted a minute. That's it's really impressive. Just like you are. Thank you so much, Ryan Walters. Always a pleasure. Always A+. That's the grade from the teacher.
It's always an honor to be on. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. All right, be good. And my closing remarks are just ahead, but also be sure to check out the 1775 Coffee Company. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 Coffee is brewed to perfection, crafted with precision, and it is built on patriotism. The farm to cup process means there is quality, authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single source. So why not try 1775 Coffee today? Go to 1775coffee.com/KG for 15% off your first order. And in closing, President Trump is showing what peace through strength looks like and what America first looks like. Ending endless wars, holding others accountable, and protecting the American taxpayer and common sense American families all across the country. It is a new day in America, and the sun is shining brighter than ever. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on this important episode. And please be sure kindly to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the latest breaking news coverage. Don't miss Don Jr.'s big show tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on Rumble.